And here we will have Professor John Peter Portelli from Canada, Professor Charles Slater from the US, Dr. Alison Taysom from England, and Professor Khalid ARAR from the US. Between 5 and 5:50 in the second panel, we will focus on autonomy in alternative schools. There will be Feyza Eykul in this panel, Cansu Kaygusuz from Istanbul Medipol University, Ayşegül Ünal Saraç from Altın Çağ School, Dr. Aktif Pamuk from Marmara University. Between 6 and 6:50 p.m., we will have 3 simultaneous oral presentations. In the fourth oral presentation, Senep Olgun, Orhan Kaptan, Dr. Gülsen Fidan, and Meryem Tutaç, Tuğçe Ayrıç, and Hakan KARATAŞ will be presenting in that order. And in oral presentation 5, Kürşat Kültür, Faruk Levent, Mevlüt Kara, Bayram Bozkurt, Fatma Avcı, and Muammer Değirmendere will provide a talk. Afterwards, Zafer Ekici, Merve Ekici, Nazmiye Hazar, Semiha Şahin, Ömer Demir, Yavuz Kamil Şevik, and Ebru Külekçi Akyavuz will deliver their presentations. Between 7 and 7:50, there will be another break. And in the last session of the day, between 8 and 10 p.m., we will have an International School Principals Initiative meeting. And country representatives will participate. Thank you so much for listening. I would like to hand over the floor to İbrahim Hakan KARATAŞ.
Teşekkür ederim Özlem.
Thank you so much, Özlem. Thank you so much for the opening talk. We will have the Provincial Directorate for National Education here, along with the Leading Principals Organization. We will focus on every aspect of school autonomy, and we will be together in every session. Now, I would like to thank the head of the scientific committee for being with us, Ibrahim KOCABAŞ. And again, the another co-head of the scientific committee is Professor Khalid ARAR. We have honorary members here with us. We have Aytaç, Açıkalın, and Selahattin TURAN. After they speak, the president of the Board of Education will speak, Burhanettin DÖNMEZ. Burhanettin DÖNMEZ is here with us today. We are very happy to have him with us. And he will deliver his opening speech at 10:30. Without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Ibrahim KOCABAŞ to the floor. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Distinguished participants and distinguished professors, academics. Of course, all throughout human history, the most debated topic has been autonomy, and it continues to be debated today. We speak about autonomy and we try to define it. It is the right to regulate your own institution. And of course, in today's world, we will focus on that from a school perspective and from a university perspective. Most of our participants are involved with universities, and that's why university autonomy is also gaining greater importance, both for our country and the world. It is a constantly debated and discussed topic. When we look at the presentations that will be delivered today, we see that there will be significant contributions to this discussion. And I believe that Ibrahim KARATAŞ has been contributing greatly as well, and also Medeniyet University and the Provincial Directorate for National Education. I would like to thank them all today. And one of the most important factors is that the participants and everyone here today will be contributing, and they have actually published their studies and their research, and I believe that this will contribute greatly to the literature and the discussion. In previous years, various documents were also prepared, and this has helped us educators and scientists very much. We have witnessed this all together. We have very distinguished professors with us here today. And without further ado, I would also like to thank everyone who has joined us here today, both domestically and internationally. Thank you so much. And to our participants as well, I wish you all a fruitful conference, and I would like to thank you all. Thank you. I would like to thank you as well. You are the head of the scientific committee, and you have provided so much support and motivation. Now, today with us, we have Professor Khalid ARAR with us today. He was with us in our first conference and today as well. He was the head of the scientific committee, and he has done everything he can to turn this into an international conference, so I would like to personally thank him as well. And I'm very grateful that he's here with us today. I would like to hand over the floor to him. And at 5 o'clock, he will have a presentation as well. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Ibrahim. Hoş geldiniz. Dear educators, scholars, planning committee, and organizers. It is my pleasure to open this international conference aimed at putting education and leadership in a cross-cultural learning path. Since I first met Ibrahim KARATAŞ throughout my great friend, Professor Selahattin TURAN, I listened to his vision and enthusiasm and agency to put education and leadership professional development in the fore. Since then, I have to witness this idea growth, and with his leading and dedicating team, I contributed without hesitation to the internationalization of this conference. The last conference dealt with school aesthetics, which is both brings to the fore the human being in the school, and of course our scholastic processes and practices, including students' well-being. This conference is given the cross-national fertilization of knowledge and practice to increase quality of education and leadership. The world faced challenging times, to name a few: international migration growth due to political instability, Black Lives Matter, and the pandemic. These fronts increased the shift from centralization, centralized education systems, to decentralized, autonomous, ecological, and community harmonized systems. While educational leaders up in the front need to set the stage in dealing with diversity, equity, and well-being of our students here in Istanbul, in Doha, Kuwait, London, Glasgow, Ontario, Long Beach, California, Korea, Shanghai. Globalization made our educational challenges both similar yet particular at the same time. A theme that will be fully discussed and explored in this conference by both national and international scholars, aiming at increasing impact on our education system, both in Turkey and globally. Please join me and the conference organizers and planning committee in welcoming our international and national contributors, our audience, and on top of them, those who lead our school systems with a sense of agency. I wish you a joyful 2 days of learning endeavor. Thank you very much.
Çok teşekkür ederim Halit
Thank
Hocam.
you so much, Professor Khalid. You have drawn a very wide vision for us all, and I hope that we will be together in future conferences as well. And I hope that we will witness this together. Now we will talk about civil society and education as well. We have always worked together. And this individual has been a visionary for me as well, Professor Selahattin TURAN. He is an honorary member, and I would like to welcome him to the floor. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank Ibrahim KOCABAŞ and Professor Khalid ARAR. The topic of the conference is very important. It's very strategic. And of course, there's a background to this in the whole entire world. The school is in a crisis and there are discussions going on. At the center of these debates is the understanding the whole of the school and the fact that it is distancing itself from this whole. There are different lifestyles and they are trying to harmonize them as well so that we can ensure a more peaceful environment so that we can foster a more ethical society. Another criticism is that in today's modern schools, they are not working towards the future and that there is a lot of dynamics, a lot of refugees, a lot of other basic concepts that are not actually at the center of debates. But we believe that the digital revolution is affecting daily life and schools and teachers. That is the trend that we observe. So learning, internal journeys, all of these concepts are important, and we have to position school autonomy in this respect. Behind this positioning is actually the main theme that each school is actually very unique in its own, and all students are valuable on their own, and they all need to be able to receive high quality education. And that's why the school needs to take priorities, and each society on its own has to preserve its national values. And there is a resistance to this, to an imperial approach as well. And we see that the world is evolving. Of course, there are jobs that are obsolete, there's social media, there's many other debates and discussions surrounding this. But each country needs to have its own independent structure, and there will be very important discussions here today as well. I hope it will be very fruitful, and I would like to thank everyone who contributed to the organization of this conference. I would like to also thank you for your opening remarks, and our professional directorate for national education has also joined us today. Welcome. Thank you so much. I would like to extend my greetings to you all from here. And Professor Aytaç Açıkalın will provide the last opening remark. I believe he was in his 40s when he completed his PhD. Before that, he worked as a school administrator and at the Provincial Directorate for Education. He has been a guiding figure in the education of Turkey. He's a very strong academic, and he has long years of experience. He is contributing to this vision. We're very happy to have you here today. We feel this motivation very profoundly. It's very great to be with you, and we thank you so much. I would like to thank you, in fact. Thank you for this great welcome. Now, it's very nice to be together today. It's an incredible experience. I would like to thank you so much for enabling this, especially the School Leaders Foundation. But it's not just the institution that needs to be thanked. It's also Dr. Ibrahim Hakan KARATAŞ and Dr. Khalid ARAR and Dr. Ibrahim KOCABAŞ that have made this possible today. So thank you all very much. I'm very pleased to be here. I hope that I will learn a lot. I hope that I will gain a lot out of this conference. And there's one thing I've noticed that has been paid attention to very well, and it's a very important topic. The durations have been determined, the durations for each talk, and I believe this is incredible. I say this in every speech I give. If we cannot manage time, then we cannot go to space. I always say this. And that is why I would like to thank you for this educational conference as well. Now, the main topic is school autonomy. This really excited me, to be honest. And I've been focusing on this topic for years. It's a very meaningful choice. School and autonomy, these two concepts. If we focus on this in terms of linguistics, I would say an autonomous school comes about. And this is our dream. We have been working on this and striving to achieve this for many years now. And for this reason, I believe that this education field needs to focus very closely on school autonomy. And this will be very fruitful and beneficial. Now in Turkey, when we discuss the concept of school, we have to focus on these concepts. And I said these were the right choice. But what is an autonomous institution? We always provide examples, and there are two examples in Turkey as well. There are institutions like university and TRT. They work in accordance with their own regulations. And when I saw that, I thought about all of this, and I looked at the functioning of these institutions, and I thought, well, if this is autonomy, I thought it's actually a bit challenging in this regard. So if we could have a regulation for schools, this might be a leading step that can be taken. Now, I will not go into many details here today, but with respect to school, God willing, on the 24th of June, there will be a plenary session, and during that session, we will talk about the development of human values in autonomous schools. And while discussing that, I will talk about a more deeply rooted approach and solution that I will offer. And for this reason, in my opening remarks, I saw that I was allocated about 4 minutes. And so keeping this in mind, I want to abide by this time restriction. And I would like to thank those who selected this topic and who took action towards this topic. Thank you so much. And when I was reviewing the program, I was very excited, and I hope that we will be able to see that today. I would like to thank all of the participants, and thank you so much for the head. Thank you.
Değerli hocam, çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you for your speech, dear professor. You have reminded us of our responsibilities with your valuable remarks once again. Now, I believe that we have had a great cooperation with our director provincial director of national education, and he has been very inspiring in terms of determining our roadmap for what we've been doing, both with regards to this organization and with regards to our other endeavors. And I would like to thank him for that. We receive your sincerest support, and I would like to thank you in front of everybody else here. And now, with that being said, I invite you to the podium. Thank you, Ibrahim. First of all, I would like to say that this is an amazing opportunity to be able to meet and speak with other leading professionals in our profession. And this is mostly due to your diligent efforts. And again, from Aytaç Hoca, we have learned a great deal, and we continue to learn a great deal from him. What we've been trying to do here is something that we've learned from our own teachers, from Burhanettin Hoca, Mustafa Aydın, Aytaç Akalın. This facilitating attitude, this way of doing things, we were able to internalize all of that because of their efforts. And we have a lot to talk about, the management of schools, private schools and the situation they're in, and other topics that we've often discussed. For example, suggestions for regulations and amendments. And these are all things that we have been trying to make progress in. And this is something that we are deeply passionate about. And of course, the pandemic somewhat impedes our current efforts at this point, but schools and schoolwork is important regardless of the crisis that we're in. At the moment, remote education, as it is right now, could be called emergency remote education, because this isn't what it's meant to be. This is an ad hoc solution that will be improved upon and will be sustained. That's what the Ministry of Education is planning towards. But during the pandemic, what we needed was an urgent solution for remote education. And planning this via a central fashion has had implications that we couldn't foresee. Planning this education together with schools and taking into consideration the number of schools, the number of courses, and the number of students, the situation the students are in, the hygiene and disinfection of the school environments, including all the stakeholders of all of this process into the solution, and supplying the technological tools to the participants and teachers, and all other matters were things that could have been or should have been managed by the schools. For example, planning the course schedules. All of these were troubles that we've had to overcome. And our minister, as well as his team, tried their best to relay all of these information and provide their support to all schools throughout this period. And we did our best to create a framework within which these schools can operate and navigate this crisis. And this showed us once again that in the Turkish education system, the schools are one of the most important structures. The training of trainers, the appointment of trainers, all of these are important processes because these people, principals, school administrators, these people have to do with everything that goes on in the school. And these are the leaders of education and training in the Turkish education system. So, from a holistic perspective, all components of a school operate as a whole. And only then can we develop our own culture and make sure that the following generations inherit this culture. And the basic principles that can make this possible is school autonomy and helping children develop themselves in terms of culture, or helping them experience arts and other extracurricular activities. Now, I don't want to take too much of your time because there's a lot of very important speakers that will give very enlightening speeches. And perhaps they might even touch upon some subjects such as practice and whatnot. So I will briefly talk about what we've been doing so far. Between the dates of 21 June and July, we will try something different entirely. With our students, we will have a process of activities that have multiple aspects. We are issuing activity books and a wealth of activities for students to partake in, and try to introduce some variety and diversity into their lives. And school principals and school administrations play a huge part in this effort. And taking into consideration the opportunities about what can be done within the school building, this is something that the school administration has to consider. Sports activities, physical activities, and guidance practices. All of these can be done in schools today by moving the education process outside the education building. You make it possible to plan and carry out multi-aspect activities for students. So again, this shows us that school-led administration opens a huge variety of opportunities for us. So school activities will be resumed as of August 27 for 2 months. And these activities will include the students, the parents, and the teachers. And we would like to see some initiative from the schools as well. So in that respect, we would like to involve all processes, all components of the school in the planning, in the systematic planning of these activities, but the legal groundwork for it. And in terms of widening the framework for this, it is essential that we cooperate with school administrations in all areas. And I believe that they will have a great deal to contribute. And what we will talk about here, and the papers and the articles that will be written on what we've talked about here today, will contribute a great deal to our own efforts. And the Teachers Foundation, Teachers Association has contributed greatly to our own endeavors as the Istanbul Directorate of National Education. We are among one of the institutions that have been affected quite severely by the pandemic. So we wanted to take part in this event. And I am looking forward to hearing what all of you say, and I'm offering you my sincerest thanks for being here today. I see here people that have worked in every profession in our industry, and I hope that this will be an efficient and informative meeting. Thank you. Thank you, distinguished director. You have emphasized one of the most important aspects of this conference, the fact that it is more geared towards practice. And before I leave the microphone to Burhanettin Hoca, I would like to say something. We will have 10 different workshops in this conference where we will try to develop professional capabilities. We have over 15 oral presentations and many panels where Aytaç Hocam, Selahattin Hoca, and other professionals will also give their own presentations. And we will be talking about school policies, school culture, management processes, and an important aspect is that we have over 20 international academics from Malta, from Canada, from Cyprus, from the United States, China, and India. Many colleagues accepted our invitation and participated in this conference to deliver their own presentations on school autonomy, school management during the COVID-19 pandemic. And Nurettin Çelik will also be giving an opening speech tomorrow. And we will be able to listen to him tomorrow at 10. We will have the Vice President of the Balkan University. And that being said, for 3 days, we will have a variety of sessions and presentations over these 2 days. And we will have a face-to-face meeting with all our participants and school principals tomorrow. And with that being said, I would now like to offer my wishes, and I wish that this will be a helpful and efficient and informative conference. We are now drafting a book on school autonomy, and hopefully by the end of this year, we will be able to publish it and our colleagues will be able to read it. Now, Burhanettin DÖNMEZ, a very distinguished instructor, is here with us because he is from the second generation of leading professionals, and he is at the head of a very distinguished and important institution in Turkey. We are delighted to have you here and honored. And now I give the microphone to you for your speech. Thank you. And it is a great pleasure for me as well to be among here with you, with all of our colleagues and teachers. I offer you my sincerest respect. Of course, we will be examining the future of schools from a perspective of school autonomy during the pandemic. And as someone who is involved in the practice, I will be delivering my own presentation on the practice aspect of things as well. And I will talk about the negatives and the positives of this current situation that we're in. Because of the pandemic, nothing has been the same. that's been the motto as well as the reality of our situation. And we were able to do some activities, some events digitally, like the way we are doing it today. And this way of doing things was internalized somewhat. And teaching by letters, teaching by post mails was the first generation of doing things. And that was later improved upon. And now, at the moment, this current pandemic made remote education, online education, a necessity. We have created the EBA platform to navigate this crisis, and we have developed our infrastructure, we have increased our coverage, and EBA is now one of the leading education platforms in Turkey, and we have started to gain experience as well. We have adopted a database management approach, and one of our efforts that we were able to carry out during this crisis was a special edition of our articles. And I'm going to briefly summarize what's included in this special issue and in the articles that are included in this special edition. So I will be providing you with a meta-synthesis of what's been written. But before I do that, I think it will be better to provide you with an introduction that is more fitting for the theme of this conference. Even the most anti-democratic institutions and persons, even terrorist organizations, are quite vocal about freedom. So the important thing is to not preach freedom, but to practice freedom. And this is even more true for schools. So schools have been conducting their own studies and publishing their own articles, but we have to emphasize the following. One of the most important developments that we are, one of the reasons why we are talking about schools in this perspective is due to the 2023 vision of the Ministry of National Education of Turkey. And they will be evaluated in terms of what they've done, in terms of their progress, and in terms of how they were able to restructure themselves during this period that we're going through. So instead of detailed theoretical analyses, which I'm sure will be done by other participants, I will instead talk about how to put school autonomy into practice. I believe that that's what I should be doing. And in our society, there are certain rules that restrict the behavior of people. People are expected to follow these rules, and if not, they will face reparations, and vice versa. But having everybody obey all the rules is not a realistic goal, because all rules restrict something or another, and people have different priorities and different motives. So these rules are based on principles that prioritize the interest of the whole nation. And these interests and priorities could limit the wishes or the freedoms of other peoples. And we can exercise our own freedom as long as we don't infringe upon the freedom of others. So when we talk about roles, we talk about things that are interdependent on one another. Without a teacher, without students, then you have no school. So autonomy, school autonomy, are these things just phrases that we throw around, or are they something that we need truly in order to have an education that is of a better quality? Then we need to have students and teachers that are aware of exactly in which areas schools need more autonomy. These are the things that we need to discuss. Everybody wants freedom, and nobody wants responsibility. Then you have a problem. If everybody does what they want, then nobody can do anything, because then you have chaos. You might say that schools are chaotic environments, or schools are loosely coupled environments. And that might be true as well, but the problem here is not with the theoretical aspect of it. What we have a problem with is the practical aspect. Because to have autonomy, you need to be capable. So when you're talking about teachers, when you're talking about teachers and students, then you need to have school principals that are able to take responsibilities, that make good decisions, because a good teacher doesn't have a need for a curriculum, because they are aware that the curriculum is determined by the needs of the students. And the student knows that they have to study not to receive good grades, but to improve their knowledge. So, having said that, we need to consider whether our students or our teachers or our school principals are like this. If yes, then we can end this conference right here and now. But if not, we have to ask what we are doing wrong. Because what we have here is a situation that's
anlatırız. Yerinden yönetim, merkezden yönetim konularını tartışırız. Türkiye'de school-based management'la ilgili sadece benim...
In Turkey, we talk about school-based management, and I have many articles on that. Of course, there are concepts that we don't agree on. For example, school-based administration and similar topics. Some of you may know that there are some that are more oriented towards teachers, more parent guardians. There are various other forms. I also teach in this regard, and when I talk about this, I ask students, I say, do autonomous schools get to choose their own teachers? But what about public schools? The president or the board for teachers, or if we ask if you would want to select the teachers, and most say, are they selected independently? Most say no, because the principal usually selects their own relatives. That's what they say. And some universities do not select their own presidents. And sometimes it is the political ideology of the individual. And so there's an issue of trust on society, and research actually confirms this as well. To overcome this problem, the administration needs to work in accordance with ethical principles. They need to be transparent. This is Turkey, and none of us are innocent. So we have to be realistic and we have to focus on concrete issues and the competencies of teachers, what we can do, and we need to focus on that. But as an individual, we see that we are putting in endeavors and efforts because all of my colleagues are here today and working hard. And sometimes, as a method, those who do not know how to swim are thrown into a pool and they are expected to survive. And so what happens is they will be in a struggle to survive, and if they're successful, then they will survive. If not, then a life jacket will be thrown at them. But I think you understand where I'm going with this. And during the pandemic, many teachers demonstrated their competencies, they demonstrated exemplary attitudes, and I would like to thank them very much. These were the ones that knew how to swim. Some of our teachers came out of this process in a stronger manner. However, we also had some losses along the way. Now, some have said, I can no longer adapt to this change and I want to retire. And those who say that, I think we need to send them to swimming courses. So we need to focus on the qualities, the strengths and the weaknesses of a good leader, of good administrators. And we have opened up new areas for them to develop their own competencies. We have web tools, and they were able to create their own materials. They were able to effectively use these materials. And some portion of them kept asking, what am I going to do now? Who is going to tell me how to do such and such? However, teachers are not soldiers. They are not workers. They need to create and design the program. They need to focus on the outcomes. They work towards a goal and they need to be able to make their own decisions in this regard. There is no obstacle in this regard. So we, the Ministry of Education, are always on the side of our teachers and we always support their good intentions. And we work towards paving the way for their efforts. Of course, the success of the teachers relies on the environment of the school and the school administration. They need to be able to fulfill their duties effectively, and to do so, they need leadership. Now, due to the limited time I was allocated, I would like to emphasize some main points. And what I would like to share are from the National Education Journal. And it's a special issue for the pandemic. There are 39 articles and it is a meta-synthesis. It is very closely related to the main theme of the conference. So we need to, young teachers have capacity and they have been seen as the greatest advantage. Their flexibility has allowed for greater flexibility within the system. So during this pandemic, the teachers were able to expand the freedom and flexibility of the school. With respect to whether schools will be opened or not, local administrations decided on that, and department heads were also given authority. There are other practices that were emphasized as well. So school-based administration can be considered in this regard. This is also within the 2023 vision document. Instead of focusing on test-oriented practices, we need to be more flexible and plan classes and lessons accordingly. And selecting classroom tools, their flexibility has been permitted for teachers, and this is very important for school autonomy. During the pandemic, their parent and guardians have been included in the process, and it is a very important outcome. It needs to be sustained. And in this regard, in order to democratize education, I believe this has been assessed as a very important development. And with respect to learning systems, these have been positive outcomes for the pandemic. especially in terms of administrators and teachers. They need to be more open to change. And the EBA TV practices will also continue in the normal periods as well, so that students can keep track of these lessons. And it's a very important outcome that they have this alternative now. Just how a doctor does not select their patient, then their teacher does not select their student either. And the strengthening of the EBA infrastructure is important as well. And teachers and students, it gives an opportunity to students who would like to pursue self-development. They can plan their own self-development, and it will give them room for freedom as well. These are extraordinary conditions, and it will help the school system come out stronger. With respect to teachers, educators, there needs to be more social and psychological support as well. Of course, there are more detailed needs analyses, and they support these findings, but administrators and teachers need to have more authority so that they have more independence, and this will contribute to that cause. So as a result, there are various needs that have arisen, and decisions need to be made in place for each specific institution. However, it's important that we are able to, this is all based on the competency of local administrations. And authority is usually centralized, but these work within a line of command. However, educational organizations are actually, they produce humans being themselves, so they need to be more horizontal structures that give more freedom. There are Senate and committees in universities, but let's not forget that the president determines these committees as well. And schools also, their departments, and they need to be strengthened, especially with respect to school autonomy. This will be an important step to be taken. And lastly, I'd like to say that education needs to respect the nature of children and their independence and freedom, but it should not overlook culture either, because cultural change will not take place in one day. And I would like to thank everyone who has enabled this conference today. I believe that this event will contribute greatly to education, and I would like to extend my sincerest regards to you all. Thank you so much for this very great speech. I believe you have laid the foundation for further talks as well. And you have provided the perspective of the Ministry for National Education with respect to the COVID pandemic as well. So thank you so much. We do not have time for questions and answers in this session. However, if any of our participants would like to ask questions, they are free to do so through the chat box throughout the day. And as the opportunity arises, we will ask you questions that are directly addressed to you. If you allocate only 20 minutes to the ministry, then I'm aware that I was a very fast speech, but I believe that I was able to quickly convey what I needed to. So I tried to adhere to the time restrictions.
Sesim kapalı değil, gönlüm açık.
I might have been muted, but my heart was unmuted. Thank you so much.
Pardon. Sayın Başkanım, özür dilerim.
Estağfurullah efendim.
Sayın Başkanım, programı en efektif, en etkili
Thank you so much. You very effectively use this time, and we effectively work towards organizing this event as well. Now, I would like to thank Levent YAZICI, our director of the Provincial Directorate for National Education. And I would like to thank Professor Ibrahim KOCABAŞ and Professor Khalid ARAR for organizing this helping to contribute to organize and for their opening remarks as well. Now, you are a speaker with us here today, and this conference hall will be available throughout 3 days ahead of us, so you are free to join us whenever you please. We will also have a panel with invited speakers, and we can maybe provide a musical performance for our participants as well at 11. And so we can begin our second session in 7 minutes. Do any of our guests here today, would they like to add anything else?
Çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you so much. I would like to say that
hocam aynı zamanda 4 yıl İbrahim Üniversitesi'nde
Burhanettin DÖNMEZ was also my professor as well. He has a very diverse and very wide vision, and he actually asked us to write an article about these topics as well. We had the opportunity to work on these issues in detail. I would like to take this opportunity to extend my gratitude to him as well. And he has put in great effort into our education as well. Thank you so much. We also have participants who are expressing their gratitude in the chat box, and we would like to thank them for joining us and listening today. And I extend my sincerest regards to you all. Now, I will place you in other sessions. Thank you.
Evet, değerli dinleyenlerimiz, izleyenlerimiz, meslektaşlarımız, arkadaşlarımız, şimdi
distinguished participants and guests, we have 4 more minutes until the next session, and I would like to speak to you all very shortly, and I will then hand over the floor to Tugay Durak, who will be the moderator. We have very distinguished guests, Dr. Rania SAWALHI from Qatar, and Dr. Eugene Samir from the UK, and Dr. Falal Ahmar from the UK as well, but I will hand over the floor to them shortly. In the meanwhile, I would like to talk about how you can attend other events throughout the conference. The conference will last 3 days, just as I said earlier. And during this process, there will be various sessions. In the morning, there will be a single panel and opening speeches. And in the afternoon, there will be more oral presentations and more workshops and parallel sessions as well. But throughout all of these sessions are broadcasted live on YouTube as well. So If you're in one session through Zoom, you can watch another one through YouTube. So you can access all of these links at all times. And in the program that we published as well, you can click on the links there. We have made announcements regarding the translation options as well. You can use the world icon at the bottom of the screen to select the language. And throughout the day, there will be the support of Nobel Publishing and ASOS Publishing. We will gift books to our participants as well. In order to win those gifts, we ask that you fill out evaluation forms and give us feedback regarding the quality of the sessions as well. And as we receive these evaluations, we will confirm that you have participated. And then we will speak with the publishing houses to gift these books. We will gift about 150 of them. Also, Chrissy Pranaki from Athens, I hope that I am pronouncing your name correctly. She said hello, and she will have a workshop on democracy and autonomy in the upcoming days. She will talk and she will provide a very nice workshop. So I would like to thank Chrissy for her very crucial support. It is a very close neighbor, we have many things in common in terms of culture as well. So thank you so much, Chrissy. I see that you've greeted us. In addition, there's a great workshop for researchers on Friday as well for systematic programs. We have Professor Selahattin Sedat Gümüş for that workshop, and we have a capacity of about 15 people. At Medeniyet University, it will be conducted face-to-face, and we will broadcast that. And at 3 o'clock today, Rania will speak, and she will lead the workshop. She will talk about women leaders in the MENA region. And it's a very important contribution, I believe. So be prepared at 3 o'clock for that workshop as well. And in the evening, we will have an international school principals initiative meeting. And tomorrow, we will also have a jam-packed program. So now I believe we can continue with the next session. And I would like to hand over the floor now. I'm not sure if I said welcome to other speakers, but I will give the floor to Tugay. Thank you, Tugay. Welcome. And you can choose to speak whichever language you like. And I wish you all good luck in this session. Thank you so much for your contributions.
Okay. Dear guests, welcome to the second international conference of school principals titled School Autonomy in the Digital Era, organized in cooperation with the Association of Leading Principals, Istanbul Medeniyet University, and Istanbul Directorate of National Education. In this session, we have three distinguished presenters, one from Qatar, two from United Kingdom. Firstly, Dr. Rania SAWALHI from Qatar University will have a presentation titled "It Took a Pandemic to Repractice in Education, School Leadership in Action." Then Dr. Fella Lahmar from the University of Bolton here in the United Kingdom will deliver her talk titled "Reflections on Islamic-Based Higher Education Institutions' Autonomy in a British Context of Choice, the Epidemic Crisis and Digitalization of Education." Lastly, Dr. Eugene from University of Strathclyde will present. Her presentation is titled as "School Autonomy in a Digital Age, Surveillance, Security, Privacy, and the Regulation of Social Media." And also, I would like to remind you that also to the presenters, each presentation will last 12 minutes. Then there will be a Q&A session for 10 minutes. To ask questions, I mean the participants, if you want to ask questions, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and also chat function again, just quite at the bottom again. And also you can use social media accounts of the conference. To be able to have the certificate of attendance, please don't forget to fill conference attendance and evaluation form. Now we can begin with Dr. Rania. Welcome again.
Good night, and thank you very much for having me here. It's a great opportunity. I'm so delighted to be with you. It's a quick tour. As it says, it took a pandemic to re-practice education. So let's have within tour, what do we mean about, are we talking about schooling or are we talking about education in general? I'm not so sure if all of you are familiar with Qatar, the small country, but it's known for hosting World Cup FIFA 2022. So the voices that we'll be hearing, most of the interviewees were from Qatar, but also we will have interviews from coming or from different or international countries. Qatar had started a very massive education reform early this century, and it had changed all of its infrastructure using digital technologies, and also lots of changes having curriculum standards, professional standards for teachers and school leaders. During COVID, Qatar was lead country in the region to continue and to proceed with education during the pandemic. So, and I'm emphasizing the words here. Early the pandemic, Ministry of Education in Qatar had led and regulated everything happening within public schools and private schools. So for the public schools, they had provided them with recorded sessions to be submitted for the students, and all the information, all the regulations were coming from them. Also, they regulated the main instructions for private international schools. For example, if teachers are allowed to come to school or not, and about the students, what kind of things to be used, etc. But left a little bit of room for the school leaders to have a choice. Then we have from August, early this year, we had blended learning, but still Ministry of Education had constructed how the percentage of having the students within the school or some of the main instructions about that, but still, for the public schools, Ministry of Education had forced them to use Microsoft Teams. They didn't have any choice in other platforms. And also they sent them recorded sessions at the beginning of the pandemic. The teachers were not allowed to have live streaming during the period of March till June 2020. And even when they need to have specific approvals for what they are going to teach and share with the students. Also, Ministry of Education had provided a massive professional development sessions for all teachers and school leaders early this pandemic to deal with the changes and what's requested from them. While private schools, their decisions were not only relying on education background, but it was mainly relying on financial status of the school. So they might select a specific platform, depends on the resources that they're having or the owners of the school. So the research questions were mainly focusing on, started with leading for learning practices, what teachers and school leaders were implementing during this COVID, and what factors affected that. Interviewed 14 teachers, 3 males and 11 males. We had principals, 8 females, and also schools were 4 private and 4 public. This is very important because for international private schools, the interviewees were coming from Qatar, from Arab countries, and also from UK, USA, Philippines. When you see the code P that goes for private teacher, for example, B goes for public schools, L goes for school leaders. One of the lenses to analyze the information or the data collected was the ecological lens, going through the chrono system and starting from them. Definitely, I'm not going to go through all of the systems here within this presentation, but I'm going to focus on the beliefs and the knowledge, which is the microsystem. So if we're going to talk about autonomy in curriculum, you will be surprised to know that 13 schools were relying on Ministry of Education decisions. For example, one of the schools were well known for having character building lessons. They stopped everything and they were just following Ministry of Education instructions, although they were private schools and they had the autonomy to do whatever they want within their curriculum. For the public schools, when I asked them how did they lead the instruction practices, she said, no, I didn't do anything. I just left that to the to the Ministry of Education to do that. Although Ministry of Education asked them to follow and to have their kind of follow-up systems and quality assurance within the schools. Only one school, they were ready before the pandemic and said that our parents, students, teachers were ready. We already used those kind of digital platforms. And even during the pandemic, we didn't stop our extracurricular activities. So they were way beyond the expectations. So if we're talking about their beliefs, if we're talking about their the group dynamic, or how did they see their own practices and actions, they all started with self-awareness. They said that we found a new strength that they never thought they had. They tried new things. They were thinking that they were not allowed to do that. So if we're talking about autonomy, it's starting from the self, starting from our own beliefs. Are we able to do that? Are we willing to practice autonomy? And many of them had mentioned that they were discovering new aspects of digital education leadership. One of them, she said, to be honest, I was against those platforms at the beginning, but now I'm enjoying. I can lead my teams remotely, and I'm thinking of different ways of doing this in the future. So the pandemic had taught us a lot. Also school leaders, one of them, she said, COVID freed me. She commented and said that now I'm allowing myself to think freely in different aspects and different ways. Many of them had mentioned that now they are able to recognize teacher skills. One of them, she said, I regret, and I emphasize this, that she did not allow her teachers to share what they knew before COVID. Now, or after COVID, she's encouraging them to share ideas and even to teach her new ideas and experiences. We need to think about our teachers differently, as had been mentioned in the opening speech. They are not soldiers. And we all have noticed that community had engaged in education opportunities. So we're talking about schooling. It's not only about school leadership. We need to have this kind of broader concept of education leadership. Community engagement, charities had provided different devices for families, for students to help them to learn. When I asked them about how do they see education and schools after COVID, one of them, she said and emphasized that she doesn't want to go back to the old system. Now she wants to try new things. She wants to really bring education back, not only schooling. The teachers were also following the same thing for the principals. One of them going to self-awareness, she said that it's time to be hero or shiro. She supports other colleagues and she's starting to think about her role as a teacher differently. And when we talk about supporting, it's not only about professional development or instructional practices, we're also talking about well-being. Teachers as continuous learners. One of the teachers, she said, it's too bad that I didn't learn this before. I learned in 1 week what I didn't learn in ages. One of the teachers, she said, I didn't rely on Ministry of Education training sessions. I asked an expert to come to my home. And I want you just to imagine early in the pandemic, when the country and most of the countries had encouraged not to have, kind of social interaction, but she asked an expert to come to her home and to ask her to, and ask him to train her. Lead from where you stand. They said that they started to share what they learned with other teachers, either using YouTube channels. They can try new methods. They felt more autonomy and more freedom to start thinking differently. Some of the recommendations that I would highly emphasize: to avoid ready-made solutions or one size fits all. It doesn't work like that, especially during pandemic, because that might affect negatively the practices of the teachers and the school leaders, which might affect also negatively the student learning. Forming learning communities instead of having short-term workshops, and promoting coaching, because all of the interviewees have said that we had jumped into actions. They didn't have time to reflect, and they didn't take decisions based on their own previous experiences or their knowledge or skills. They just were following the stream. We need also to provide positive. We need to trust our teachers and to know more about their qualifications. It's more about talent management, to see what kind of opportunities do we really have in our schools. And we need to focus on social activities, because all of the interviews we're talking about, we miss the social interaction with everyone. We need to have this kind of energy within our teams. Some of the final thoughts that I would like to conclude with: one of the principals, she said, when are we going to get out from these boxes? Detailed plan drawn for us. We got an opportunity, and she's mentioning COVID, a small change, but we still see some school leaders asking, when are we going back to the normal situation? When we will return? Now she's emphasizing and saying no one wants to become an innovator and change the current industrial model. She wanted deeply to change and to see how we can be approaching education differently. And once again, when we talk about education, we want to instill continuous learning, lifelong learning, wildlife learning. It's not only about school, because school is a place. COVID had taught us that it's way beyond that. And we need all of us to go back to emphasizing the importance of learning, continuous learning, as leaders, as teachers, as everyone related in these communities. So a question for all of us: are we really ready for the future, for all the uncertainties that are we going to face, regardless of what are we going to face? That's something we need to think about and to see how kind of innovative solutions are we going to face. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a great presentation and finally finished. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will take the questions at the end, but for the attendees, if you have a question, please write in the chat box and or Q&A button. And now we can have the second presenter, Dr. Fella.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for attending this conference. My presentation will be on the, as you said, reflections on Islamic-based higher education. In the UK, is based in the UK. I have been working in higher education, Islamic higher education in the UK at different institutions and different types for many years. So these questions are part of the practice. And the question that is leading the analysis in this presentation is how do the epidemic crisis and the situation that of the marketized UK higher education contribute to the ongoing dynamics of change through the emerging opportunities and challenges. Also, another question is about the autonomy, is where is the line to be drawn between autonomous change driven by the Islamic higher education institutions in the UK from within, and the transformation which is rather driven by compliance and reaction to the external agendas of security and marketization. So the presentation is three parts. The first part is just very brief about the context. The second part about the challenges, and the third part is about that we have really to reflect and deliberate about it. So the higher education institutions within the British socio-political context is actually one of the dominant of the prevalent discourse is about risk, is about extremism, is about this policy of prevents. Thus becomes part of the Office for Students. The Office for Students is dealing with the students' concerns and serving students basically. So, and also institutions have to have a plan, action plan for dealing and cooperating with prevent duty. Another thing is the marketization. The higher education in the UK has moved from the 90s of being free to being more now to a market model of higher education that allows the Islamic institutions to emerge and to thrive, but at the same time place them within some limitations for their autonomous choices and what they can do. So it's here is the higher education is presented as in the markets. The students become consumers, and the knowledge becomes product, and that's asked the questions for Islamic education and how will Islamic education, the philosophy of Islamic education, the standards of quality. Then now the Islamic education institutions that are accredited have accreditation by bodies. I will just share with you. They have limitations of the standards of quality with regards to the qualifications and with regards to the assessment and to the levels, different levels. Also, the Office for Standards is a department dealing, as I said, following in terms of participation, quality of academic experience, and protecting the customers, protecting the students' interests. Through that, then there are many challenges that emerge through that with regards to Islamic education, higher education institutions, autonomy in this context, especially with the pandemic. We find the types of the higher education in the UK. There are higher education institutions which are independent. They are teaching and learning Islam theology via traditional Muslim seminaries, and they don't go through the accreditation or validation of their programs. So they teach us traditional ways. And there is other type which are accreditation, as you say here. These are taken from an Islamic institute. So you see the TEF here is silver, which is the quality, the brand that is being assessed. The BAC here is the accreditation body, and the QAA here is about the quality assurance for the qualifications. And with all that will come limitations for the autonomy of what that institution can do. The validation, some institutions, after they get the accreditation and or the quality reviewing, they go into the validation of their programs to another university, which means they have to follow those universities' regulations. So here, the quality resources and the infrastructure of those institutions, when suddenly the pandemic took place, first those institutions, their students come, most of them from disadvantaged backgrounds of the Muslim community in the UK, and from the traditional seminaries. So in this case, they are they have to put in place lots of support to those students. When the pandemic came, suddenly, that also put those institutions under a pressure of the type of the facilities. Especially that now the competition of the market means the Islamic institutions which are validated, they have to reduce their fees. So you may find in the mainstream, the Islamic studies degree is for £9,000 and more per year for a student, and then you find it in a Muslim institution for 5,500, for example, nearly half of the price. So that will come with the price of putting lots of pressure on the Muslim institution in terms of facilities. The National Student Survey here, the NSS, is an annual survey that is for students. And their responses, their satisfaction in terms of services, in terms of teaching quality, in terms of assessment, in terms of resources, the library, the IT, all that will contribute to the quality of the institute and will be publicly shared as part of the brand. Also, the teaching excellence and student outcome framework that the NSS will contribute to the brand. This is the brand here. The TEF rating is voluntary, but those institutions that seek to have the brand will contribute to their marketization. However, it puts more limitations as well, and they need to have more of supporting the, more of satisfaction, student satisfaction. That will give power to the students basically of what they want and the pressure to change from within. So now that will change the dynamics, external pressures, and now internal pressures from the students who are looking for the best value for money. Now we look for then students as customers. And here you find the teaching excellence for the outcomes, the employability skills to develop graduates who are digitally capable. The opportunities and limitations here is when you reduce the fees, then their autonomous becomes even more limited, as the validation universities will put some more standards to ensure they are under pressure to robust system to have partnership with Islamic institutions. So funding remains a crucial factor that is a limitation to those institutions. then you find the competition on prior learning, how much, some institutions, they count for the students come from seminaries, they can go and have only 2 years to have their BA, and others may have in mainstream Islamic education, they may go straight away to postgrad. So this comes a pressure on the small net of students they are competing to have their students. They had to reduce the fees. So some students, they find this attractive because they don't have to pay the loan because of the Islamic interest. However, that comes as well with more limitations of what those institutions or these two institutions can do in terms of resources, which will feedback into the student survey and satisfaction, as I said in here, which again will come to the TEF and the evaluation brand for the Islamic institution. So here you'll find also other challenges in, as I said here, so the market, the funding capacity of the institution will put also the competition of the highly qualified staff, because if they reduce the fees, and then will have an impact on the resources, will have an impact on the student satisfaction, also on the quality of the qualified and experienced staff who are in the competition of the market with other universities. So in this case, there are many challenges, which is, you will not come as a cheap. And this will create kind of a dynamic from within the demand of the students, but from outside of the hierarchy of the established institutions, that they can attract the students. So those institutions will become vulnerable of in terms of their autonomy if they want validation within the system. Now, the education-specific dynamics that I just explained here, they're different from the Waqf education within the Islamic system, the traditional one, when inclusivity to the disadvantaged and the poor is actually within the Waqf and they are served. However, in here, they have to pay. At the same time, they have to be served and they are customers. Which raise questions of what Islamic education, what Islamic about it, and how to envision success and an autonomous Islamic education. The leaders in those schools will find themselves under many kind of dilemmas: their Islamic values, practical demands, market pressures, quality assurance. And this is why I asked here for the concept of tafakkur, reflexive deliberation about the values. Otherwise, with those institutions will be driven by the market and the demand of the customers rather than driven by their own values. And in here, the drive of the NSS, the drive of the TEF rating, the students' knowledge and experiences, the students' expectations. So the changing role of the universities. I would argue that, that employability of graduates remains a moral and ethical aspect of Islamic institutions' higher education, because as Ibn Ashur, through Maqasid, the Maqasid framework that promotes education for dignity, not only for the students, but also for the community. So these are aspects of learning goals and feedback and assessment and situation factors that maybe leaders may need to think about in terms of application, integration, and human dimension. So tafakkur here is actually to go deeper than just to provide the subject, and to actually watch the values of the institution, the embedded values within the culture of the institution. And the changing policies have implications, that is the conclusions on the institution's priorities to comply. So therefore, there are consequences on the culture from within the institutions and the language that is being used, using the students as customers. The responsibility for educational leaders and administrators in these institutions is actually to analyze these consequences and to come with the direction of the institution. Particular attention to be paid to the unintended impact of these policies over the provision of Islamic education. What values do we provide? And in here, what is the clear vision of higher education goals for these institutions with developed internal framework? Means my recommendation is to develop an internal framework of excellence of evaluation with a constant critical review process rather than driven by the market. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this great presentation. I have, even for me, normally I'm doing a PhD in higher education studies, but I haven't heard of quite much about this topic, but it's quite timely and brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Eugene. Welcome, Eugene.
Excuse me. I'm still recovering from my second vaccination. I'd just like to say hello to everyone from rainy, cold Glasgow. It's 11 here. So different from the 52 degrees I was used to in the UAE. I'm going to just try to share the screen here. And I just want to make a couple prefatory remarks. One is that I'm going to go through many of the slides fairly quickly because you'll have access to the slides later on if you want to go back and look at some of the detailed text. I've also designed this in a visual graphic form, partly because it's the language of the digital world, which is very graphic, but also so that I can move through some of the content fairly quickly. Because I want to concentrate on some of the implications at the end. But I want to at least visually recreate the world of the digital. Some of it does involve some penetrating cartoons. And this is certainly a problem of some of the youth right now who seem to live in a virtual world much of the time, and it affects for students, it affects a great deal in their behavior, as some of these points I'll be raising later on. For many of us, still going into the digital world looks something like this. One would have said down the rabbit hole many years ago, and now it's sort of heading into hyperspace. So trying to situate oneself in terms of what one does as an educator and administrator can be difficult. These are the 5 sections. The first 3 are very short. The first 2 are very short, and then the following 3 are just 1 slide each with a number of important points. So certainly the digital world has brought many benefits in terms of teaching, with access to more curricular materials, more flexibility, especially with pedagogy. And if you're in higher education, I end up also supervising while I'm at conferences in other countries. And I know the business centers of several airports because between flights, I tended to go and read my student emails. But it also allows for different kind of options in teaching materials. And it also allows some people to hold joint classes with students from 2 different countries at the same time. A colleague of mine in Berlin does this quite regularly. But on top of all of that, there are many layers of threat, some which individual schools can deal with, administrators and teachers may be able to deal with, but in many cases it's a system problem. So it's an interconnected, multi-level, multi-dimensional problem. This is just a list. I guess you could do a bit of a self-test here. Do you know all 15 of these top cyber threats to which schools and scholars are subject as well? Spam, I think everyone is familiar with that and becoming aware of phishing and malware, data breaches. I don't know if you've been involved in a botnet attack. I was in Estonia when a botnet attack was launched as an experimental cyber warfare by Russia back in about 2008. So there are many threats really to the actual working daily life of a school. The security of the records, the data, the documents, and individuals' privacy are subject to many kinds of threats. Increasingly in schools, cyberbullying. I've actually seen some of this happen in a couple of places. One was Bahrain, and here in Glasgow, where I am, cyberbullying by students. The overuse of social media is coming up in a lot of the research as problematic because it affects people's ability to empathize with other people. It has increased narcissism rates, and it has created for vulnerable people an addiction. The sources of the threats, which is what I'm going to concentrate on in here, certainly the dark web, hackers, and now national actors. Russia has several official hacker communities, I guess I could put it that way, in units, who've done targeting, not just of government agencies in other countries, but also other social institutions, including universities, and I would suspect some at the school level. In the numbers of complaints now, and not everybody does complain, but last year in the US, over 300,000 complaints were filed, which means there are probably about 1 million incidents or more. The other, something that we saw also when it's allied with certain kinds of politics, as in the US, the undermining of knowledge and expertise. So there are major disinformation campaigns and a lot of alternative facts, conspiracy theories and that sort of thing through social media. This is a very interesting site in terms of looking at what the impact has been on schools and school staff, just keeping track of the number of incidents. Data breaches is so far the most common. But the third point, because I got caught in this in December, a group of us who were going to present in Cameroon got together for a Zoom session, and we were actually hacked by a group who did all of these things to us. Obscene images, sounds, and videos. At one point, they took over one of the participant computers and started issuing messages to the group. As soon as I saw the first message, which was in Russian, which I understood enough of, I had to disengage immediately and say, sorry, but I've got to go because having your computer taken over can happen very easily. That was in the days when Zoom didn't have a lot of security, and we had gone into a recording mode, which wasn't a good idea. The other point, the fourth point I just want to point out here, the more technology a school has, often higher income schools, the more vulnerable they are. So we tend to think if we have more and more IT and security, we're going to be safer. And that's not in fact what happens. Again, just some data. This was K-12 cyber incident types in the US in 2020. And you can see it involves quite a broad range of types of security breaches. So I've only focused on 4 that seem to be the most common affecting schools and therefore responsibilities of educational administrators. First, I just want to introduce this. When we talk about the web, there's the surface web, which most of us know. There's a deep web where many organizations store a lot and try to keep it as secure as possible. The cloud is there and it's not secure as much as my university IT people tell us to keep using it. And then the dark web. And this is a very difficult place to navigate if you're not a hacker, but a great deal of information theft and other things happen through the dark web. So surveillance. This cartoon was inspired by an incident at a doctoral seminar I had in Dubai a few years ago. There was a bit of a joke going on at the beginning of class about perhaps we should turn off all our mobiles so nobody can spy on what we're saying. And I had to inform them that they're going to have to simply leave it outside the room or take the battery out or their SIM card, because turning it off actually doesn't turn off in terms of spying on you. These are the kinds of indications that digital surveillance is going on, usually by hackers. I have seen this. You notice differences, fluctuations in access and speed of your computer. Sometimes it's because you've been infected with a virus. Sometimes you're connected to a security system in the country where they're dealing with problems at the time, and that will slow everything down. So you could sort of correlate that with later reports in the newspaper about something that happened. Data security. Trojan malware is a way of getting into people's computers, putting viruses into them, and putting in backdoors, for example, for more access. The DDoS DDoS attacks, where many computers will be basically taken over without the user being aware of that. and then launching attacks on various servers and basically shutting them down. Phishing scams. The numbers of phishing sites that have been detected are enormous, and they're climbing rapidly. And these are only the ones that have actually been officially identified. That means the actual numbers are probably much higher, but this is where people lose a lot of their personal information. Privacy. There's a bit of a myth about this, that privacy security is something that's very, very secret. Nobody knows anything about it. If you go into Amazon, you're going to find hundreds of books on all of this. And I've been surprised that a lot of people don't realize a great deal of technical information is actually available through major publishers. I began reading cybersecurity books about 12 years ago. And found that there was a great deal. This one I put up because this happened to me a year and a half ago at Strathclyde. I came in on a Saturday to teach. I was a bit early so I could get set up. And there were men running around with ladders and installing cameras into every single room. And but I mentioned it to the students because I told them we had a new visitor up in the top corner of the ceiling of our room. And they didn't really respond to that. So there's also, interestingly, when you raise security issues, sometimes with university staff and the students, people don't either internalize it or do anything about it. There are also many failures of privacy that have to do with users. And this is going to link with a couple of points I'm going to raise a bit later on. There are many things that we do. For example, do you cover up your laptop camera when you don't use it, when you're not actually needing it? Are you covering up the microphones? I do have several colleagues now who cover the camera, at least, so that it can't be used without their knowledge. Social media. Again, there are many kinds of social media, and they are difficult and dangerous to use at times. I'm actually surprised that my faculty has launched a Twitter account that we're all supposed to use. I refuse to go into any of the social media of this kind because of the threats. If you're doing any kind of educational administration research, at the government policy level, you are in touch with people in government agencies in places, and you cannot afford to have your laptop or even your mobile compromised. So following a lot of the cybersecurity literature I've been reading, I simply don't connect. So that's going to be a problem for a lot of schools who try to use social media because it's used so much by students. They also use it for bullying, by the way. The other is this identity issue, because with social media, it's not just narcissism that has increased addiction and a reduction in empathy, but people are beginning increasingly to think of themselves in terms of their online self. And of course, that creates a security problem for people because you think you're dealing with one person, when in fact you're dealing with someone very different because they can fake their identity so easily. Also, the other problem is how much of our teaching, our pedagogy and curriculum is taken over by online systems and programs that prepackage a lot of curriculum and pedagogical without giving us the option to actually control it or change it. I mentioned cyberbullying. It takes many forms. It can be really vicious. And in some cases, it has driven students to suicide. Trolling is another one. I'm not going to go through the details here because I'm probably running out of time soon. But the impact of trolling on children and youth, and also on adults, has been huge in very serious psychological effects, up to the point of potential suicide. And there are many types of trolling. In a school environment, educational environment, you need to be aware of these things because you can run across them or see indications of them. So, how many school staff are actually prepared and trained in the most basic cybersecurity, which involves many of these levels that I mentioned before? from the individual to the group, to the school, to the system, the government system that we're using. There are many sources available giving free information to, sorry, that's my cat, cybersecurity. And these are all things I think that school staff should have to be trained in these days and be able to function, at least in terms of knowing who to report it to, how to recognize it, how to pull students out of a dangerous situation, etc. Yeah, the cloud. It also, student attitude to their work in knowledge acquisition and skill sets is shifting dramatically by their time on the internet. So there's a competitive aspect to this. So there are many different levels here I mentioned before. Policy roles, establishing systems, making sure the staff are trained and prepared and know how to do things. Leadership needs to model it at all times. Also, I believe there needs to be a mandatory section of graduate admin and leadership curriculum where you need qualified people and cybersecurity related to dealing with school systems. And also, it needs to be built into research into the admin field. It simply is going to have to be built in as a core part of the field and our training and our preparation. And I think I will end on this one. That happened to me in Canada once. Turned out someone was accessing and reading our emails who wasn't supposed to be doing it. And then I've just put in a few selected sources here at the end for any who want to track down. I think these ones are safe, but I have to also issue a warning. Anything you do going into YouTube or Google carries risk with it. And I'll just finish there.
Thank you, thank you. That kind of a hush fact of the digital era. Thank you for that. Okay, we have nearly 10 minutes left, and now we can do the Q&A session. And let me read the questions for you. But firstly, as a moderator, I can ask the question, and then I will go through the other questions as well. Actually, firstly, I would like to remind the attendees here. The first presentation was about the school leadership in Qatar, and which was brilliant to understand the differences between the private schools and public schools. But then we come to the UK and then we understand the challenges UK Islamic institutions face. And then we face the harsh fact of digital era. And then Dr. Eugene just explained brilliantly the digital security, the importance of the digital security. So please keep in mind these three topics. Okay, first I would like to ask that, as far as I understand, normally we were supposed to thinking about, okay, this is the new digital era, and then we learned how to use the digital tools to educate ourselves, to educate our kids or children, whatever. But then now we are facing also the security issues, etc. But my question is kind of quite general. After 1 or 2 years or in the future, what the educators as teachers we should do in education to educate our kids, our children, to be aware of the opportunities and also challenges of the digital era? It is a kind of quite broad question for the teachers, because as far as I understand here, we have many principals and teachers. What the teachers and principals should do to prepare our children for the future, for the benefits of the digital era, but also the challenges of the digital era? Just some, if you would like to say something about it. all presenters?
Oh, there's a crisis. Yeah, somebody asked, I just popped up on my screen about schools being potentially in crisis. Well, they're certainly heading into it in a digital sense. If you look at the emerging statistics that are coming out in many countries, and it's happening on so many different levels. It's affecting attitudes, values. It's also with the narcissism, people care only about themselves and not others' protection and security. And that's something that needs to be reversed right away. This is also, of course, a major issue for some countries more than others. Having lived in the Gulf, where security issues are still critically important, everything that you do has to take security into mind. And that sometimes that means contacting the security agencies to get advice and sometimes assistance with things. So the crisis, I think in many places, the crisis has already started. I don't think we're noticing it. And if you look at state actors who are distributing disinformation, conspiracy theories, and using social media to target a lot of people and affect political and social movements, we are in crisis already, and it will get worse.
Dr. Durak, do you want me, may I just answer your questions also?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you're talking about preparing our students for the future, I would say the future started yesterday. And when we discuss and talking about pandemic, we need to understand that this crisis is also a learning journey. Whatever kind of decisions that we're taking, it's also affecting the students' learning, affecting us and affecting the new generations. And when we're talking about education technologies, digital technologies, whatever that we're having or emphasizing, we need to think about two things: managing the change and change management. So we need to be prepared. We need to tell them how to switch on, switch off. We need to instill the values of learning instead of only the grades and the scores. So our understanding of education in first place, this is what I try to emphasize within the presentation. It's not about schooling. It's not about the walls. It's not about a shallow understanding of how we learn. It's way beyond that. It's about the values, about building our own purpose, our own values, our own way of continuous learning, and how we keep the purpose and begin with the end of mind. So with everything that changes that we're facing, this time it was the pandemic, maybe something else in the future. If we're talking about digital, if we're talking at any different aspect, regardless of the level, yes, there are lots of things to focus, but we need to be aware of our own identities, our own culture, the context, and how we teach them to understand the bigger picture and themselves at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Rania. If you allow me to add something as well in here, the education now is no longer about the information that we give the learners in the class. So it's actually the leaders when they design programs and they design, their schooling, whether in any stage, we think about the longer term, after many years, after they leave the school, after they forget this information, what skills do we want the learners to take with them to navigate through that uncertainty and to navigate through that insecure and through that open space beyond the walls of the educational institutions.
I could just add a quick point here because it builds on what us are saying. There are already countries that are beginning to prepare and deliver mandatory cybersecurity at the secondary school level, and some I think are looking at much earlier, and also at the university level as a citizenship responsibility. It's absolute, it's mandatory, everybody must do it because it's the whole community that becomes at risk and the country that becomes at risk, but also in quite a number of subtle ways. That's how part of the way that Islamophobia is spread. And so the security issue affects everything. It affects religion, culture, language, a sense of identity, a sense of responsibility. So I think this is one direction some countries are already moving into. I know about one in the Gulf that I've been somewhat involved with in terms of designing something that's going to be absolutely mandatory for everyone. And then it becomes legally regulated, and it will have to be.
Thank you. And this is related to the point I raised about the transitional space of Islamic higher education institutions and how to take the significance of learning experience and taking the different dimensions to actually ask what can they return for the future beyond their studies at the institutions. So yeah, it's very linked to each other and the values. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There's a question. There are two questions actually in the Q&A session. I think the first one is for Dr. Eugene, and Dr. Ms. Nazmia is asking that there are developments in education about informatics technologies. Can it gather electronic systems in e-governments over these countries in a common network? That's it. Teacher-student personal security is no longer an international threat. What did you set like this?
Yeah, not quite sure about the question, but if you're reading the research, the cybersecurity research, and talking with people in cybersecurity units, agencies, the threats are at all levels. There are a lot of psychological studies done on children looking at the impact of too much time on the internet, but also unsafe practices they're involved in. But you also have a professional responsibility. What I see here is that the education IT people teaching that are teaching mostly just how to use programs, build it into the curriculum and pedagogy. Even when I ask them if they cover cybersecurity with the students in the schools, quite often they don't touch it at all. It's almost like a kind of denial that there's a problem there, because if you deny there's a problem there, then you don't have to deal with it. And it's a very complex, difficult thing to deal with on many levels. So I'm not sure if that actually answers the question or not.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it answers. Okay, there's one more question. Dr. Chrissy is asking, do you think that cyber safety should be a global issue for teacher training or national issue? Again, I think this is for you.
Yes, yes. And it is becoming that way. There are many international organizations, I mean, through the UN and others, and also regional bodies that countries operate through, like, you know, like GCC, the Arab League, the NAFTA thing, which is Trump kind of messed up. But these are becoming issues. These are on the agendas because there are so many problems. And I mean, ransomware has emerged just recently as a very serious problem. And that one was traced back to Russia, not to their Cozy Bear unit, which does stuff, but to another one. So it is global. And that is how a lot of international politics is being done. And we now definitely have established cyber warfare. And innocent citizens in schools and other organizations can be caught up in this unknowingly.
Thank you. Thank you. There is one more question. This is the last question, actually, and then I think the attendees can ask the other questions after the presentation. This question is coming from YouTube, and this is for Dr. Rania. And Dr. Rania said that there was no face-to-face classes between March and June. The question is asking about what was the reaction of the parents. Yeah, that is the question. How the parents react about no face-to-face classes?
Thank you for the question. There are lots of different reactions. So that depends on the parents' awareness and their knowledge of how to use the platforms and how to use those kind of technologies. And that's why I mentioned that some charities and some organizations had provided opportunities or platforms or devices for the parents to be aware or to know how to use this. Some schools face lots of issues with parents complaining and they were coming to schools because they were not able to deal or to understand. They had hotlines, they had WhatsApp, they had different ways of communicating with parents, but that didn't help much. So there are lots of factors that affecting. We can generalize and say that all parents had reacted the same. As we all, even within the same family, we have different actions and different reactions. But the main thing here is that with the centralized systems, we need to be aware that the decisions Ministry of Education that all or we are taking, are we providing a space for school leaders to utilize the resources within their context and to be able to deal with the challenges that they are facing and to equip them with different opportunities or to support them to take the decisions that they need according to this context, or we're just forcing them to follow specific regulations that we think because we had generated or we had sent it to them from our offices. I'm not saying this is the case in Qatar. I'm just asking a general questions for all educators around the world. So when we design a solution or when we suggest a way to deal with those kind of challenges, we need to make sure that we're dealing with the users, we're dealing with parents, with communities, with students, instead of just sending memos that we are not aware or understanding how it impacts or affects those contexts or situations.
Thank you, thank you. Now we can finish this session, but I would like to firstly thank you to the presenters. And first to Dr. Rania, thank you so much for your attendance and then for the great presentation. And then your certificate will be issued soon after the session. And also Dr. Fella, here's your certificate. Thank you so much for your participation again and for the great presentation. And Dr. Eugene, again, thank you so much. These certificates will be issued soon after the conference. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you.
Ben de teşekkür ediyorum. Öncelikle
I would also like to thank the speakers.
Açılış konferansında Profesör Doktor Burhanettin DÖNMEZ hocamıza, sonrasında Çağrılı konuşmalarınız için Doktor Rania, Virginia ve Fella hocamıza çok teşekkür ediyorum. Tugay hocam size de ayrıca çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Şimdi saat 12'de panelimiz başlayacak.
We will have another panel.
Eğitimin geleceği, eylemler ve
about the future of education, actions and schools. And we will have
Dr. Fahriye Altınay hocamız.
Fahriye Altınay from Cyprus.
Hindistan'dan Ramesh SHARMA hocamız.
And Ramesh SHARMA from India.
Çin'den
and
Dr. Ahmed
China,
hocamız.
Dr. Ahmed TLILI will deliver their presentations.
Yes, shall we start?
Sure.
Serkan hocam burada mı acaba?
Is Dr. Serkan Uçan from Istanbul Medeniyet University, is he here? He is not. Professor Fahriye will deliver the presentation in his stead.
International School Principal Conference. Today panel session, which is entitled The Future of Education, Actions and Schools. I am very pleased to be in this conference with my colleagues, Professor Sharma and Professor Ahmed from India and China. And also I am going to moderate this panel, and I will share with my experiences for the future of education on the terms of the schools and actions. First of all, I would like to give some brief information about this theme on the panel, and then Dr. Ahmed will deliver his speech, and then Dr. Sharma will deliver speech, and then we are going to get your questions to make a great insight on the future of education on action and schools. Yes, today we are going to discuss about the future of education. Of course, the theme of the conference is about the school principles on the terms of the school autonomy. As we are knowing that I am Fahriye Altanay from Nearest University. Our aim is to discuss about the future of education on behalf of action and schools. And the content of the presentation to be considered as we experiences on the COVID-19, and we really experience on the transformation in the country-based, cultural-based, and different practical-based in order to consider school culture and the system, of course, the experience of the online education. So we need to consider about the future of education, and we need to focus on the learning and teaching by merging the skills and, of course, suggestions. As we can say that after the COVID-19, we really get the visibility of that new ways of life, new codes of behavior for connected societies. So we need to consider recreate our skills, recreate our education system, of course, to reimagine the school system in terms of these new codes of behaviors in the connected societies. So in the management side, we can experience transformational leadership theory in terms of leadership, how leader works with the teams to identify these needed changes and to create a future direction. Most of us, many scholars use this butterfly effect. Why we need to consider butterfly effect? Because COVID-19 make this visibility and impact for this change and development. So we need to get a clear understanding on the language and paying attention to need and expectation, how to create a value for the future and education. So we need to consider attitudes and readiness to change and transformation in terms of policy and decision-making mechanism, institutional support, intellectual capacity, digital infrastructure, learning community, and of course, organizational culture and school culture. While we are going to consider about the reflection in education, we need to evaluate before and during the COVID-19 impacts to the education. So when we look at the new tendencies and new key terms to discuss in the school system and the education system, change should be connected with the development, and also from the perspective of the transformation, we need to adapt to societal values and ethics, skills and professional development, new codes of life for learners and managers and principals, and also in the management system, we need to consider equal look and equal lives for the school culture and implications. So of course, in the management perspective, we need to consider about the collaboration culture and partnership to consider in the future of education. In the evaluation of the reports and the researches, we need to consider how to integrate information, research, teamwork, and responsibilities to make a core set of skills. So in the current situation, universal education for the terms of the inclusiveness, universal values and design, peer support learning, and attention and respect terms should be integrated to education system for the future projection. Technological infrastructures, digital education strategies, policies in all levels of education and digital learning resources should be the main dimension for the school system for the digital education policies and implementation. What we need the different education, different school perspective in terms of the transformation and radical change should be considered. The terms of rethinking how this system leaders design schools and all the components of the school should be considered in a rethinking perspective. And exchanging of ideas, policies, practices, assessments are very important to put an attention for human connection and interaction as a heart of the education. So thinking smart, connected studies is very important. So in this conference, we are sharing, we are motivating, acting, respecting for transformation in order to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based for the future of the education. So in the education, we need to make value-adding actions and to make all the people or learning to be connected to each other for making in the school system to valuable efforts to the society. Reimagine the education, we need to consider after the COVID-19 how to make the survival of the humanity and make the consideration of the risk management. In this respect, we have to consider the action of commoning and how to make the negotiation, communication, mutual support and cooperation among projects and the school system. So reframing the humanism for shared future is very important. While considering the rethinking the education, we need to know that a new social contract between education and society should be settled. Also, the collaboration between teachers and working with the conjunction with families, humanities is very important. With all partners should be existed in this system. In this respect, building inclusive educational ecosystem is a very important action in order to integrate digitalization. So when we consider the education, we need to consider how we can come together to share knowledge, how we can think together and learn together in order to make a value-based and value-adding actions for the future. In this respect, schools for learning is very important for social services in order to make a social relationship and make a connection between human and dialogue and exchanging for the development of the school system in a collective living manner. So in the management perspective for the future of education, strategic management is an important point to make a possible environmental changes in the school system. So we need to reflect on learning, collaboration, and we need to consider self-determination, responsibility, value education, and story sharing for future education. In this respect, we need to consider how these digital learnings make a valuable action for future education. It is convenient, it is cost-effective, provide communication, and of course, leadership skills are very important to take the responsibility of our learning and to make a change and development for all actions. So open pedagogy, we need to consider and differentiate classical learning model and teaching model and online learning model and to create a both merits of these practices together. And we need to understand learning driven education nature and system for sustainable development in education system. In this respect, developing skills and to be aware of all these skills is very essential. So when we look at the four heads of metaphor in the pedagogical, social, and managerial role and technical role, we need to put it on a harmonic picture. So generic skills, online context learning is very important for the future of the education. In terms of the generic skill, management of self, management of others, management of information and task is very essential skills to be considered and to be put in action in school system for the future of education. When we look at the 9 ideas for concrete action today, based on the UNESCO report, we need to understand the against inequalities, right to the education, value to the teaching profession and teacher collaboration, and promoting students, youth, and children participation and right is very important. Of course, school not only a physical space, school as a separate space-time for collecting living is very important. And also making free and open source technologies available to teachers and students is an important action for future of the education. Ensuring scientific literacy within the curriculum, protecting domestic and international financing of public education, and global solidarity is very important to ending the inequality. Inclusive education are the critical point of view we need to consider for the management side in order to diffuse this policy to the future of the education. And also how to consider the dimension of human resource management, accessibility, material, and inspection for this development is very important. Digital stories, open education resources, collaborations, and also making some joint projects is very important. And also sensitivity training for managing diversities is very important for the future education. To the conclusion of my presentation and my sharing, I would like to underline the strategic management for sustainability is very important. For the future of education, considering the well-being is very important. So we need to connect all dimensions, for example, solidarity, partnership, collaboration, interaction, social inclusion, motivation, to put all this system to make all school dimensions in a value-adding actions for the schools in terms of the future of education in a sustainable manner. Thanks for your listening. I would like to try to give a general perspective about the key dimension about the future of education. And we know that the interdisciplinary actions for the future of education is very essential. In this regard, I would like to give the turn to the Professor Ahmed TLILI from Beijing Normal University. And he is expert in the open educational resources and co-director of the Open Educational Resources Lab at Smart Learning Institute of Beijing Normal University. And he is the expert in the special group studies on educational gamification, game-based learning, and his research interest in open education, educational psychology, and artificial intelligence. We are making joint collaboration to put an impact on the future of education. So Professor Ahmed, it's your turn to share your perspective on the future of the education.
Thank you, Professor Fahriye, thank you. Could you please turn off your screen? Thank you. Do you see my screen now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. So thank you everyone for this very interesting panel and for your interesting presentation, Professor Fahriye. So as you can see from the title, for me for today, for future education, I will focus about one essential part, which is openness. So let's start by some basic statistics. I'm pretty sure that everyone knows this. So everyone knows that over 1 billion students have been affected by the COVID-19 and they could not go back to school. Specifically in China, we have almost 300 million students which were affected by the COVID-19. And therefore, we have seen a lot of challenges which were emphasized by the COVID-19, such as limited accessibility to education, So too many students, parents, even teachers did not have reliable infrastructure or resources. So accessibility to education was a big problem. Also, problems related to difficulties of innovative teaching approaches, lack of learning engagement, and of course, absence of competency and knowledge. So based on this crisis and those challenges, we have seen a lot of people talking about future education. And we have seen a lot of researchers, for instance, talking about future education, about smartness. We need to have smart future educations. Others are talking about we need to have personalized future education, etc., etc. For me, at least, I think we need to look to the bigger picture. It's not about personalization. It's not about smartness. It's not about these things. These things are important for sure, and they are correct for sure. But we need to look to the bigger picture. What's the bigger picture? For me, at least, I think future education should or must fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals provided by the United Nations. So if we put this is our ultimate goal, now we are talking about future education. And if we are talking about sustainability goals, we are talking about educational equality and equity, we are talking about health, we are talking about finance, we are talking about a lot of things. So this is the ultimate goal for future education. Now, how can we achieve future education? So at least from my perspective, future education should be mainly based on openness. And if we say openness, we will talk from my perspective on 3 dimensions. First, open science. Second, open innovation. And third, open education. And as you can see, to achieve openness, we have to provide 4 layers. First one is supportive policy. Second one, we should create open educators. Third one is about cooperation between industry and academia. And finally, develop innovative, sustainable models. So we will go one by one to further talk about this one. Let's start by the first dimension, which is open science. What's open science? What's the goal of open science? So according to UNESCO, the idea behind open science is to allow scientific information, data, and outputs to be more widely accessible. And here we are talking about open access and more reliably harnessed, which we are talking about open data, and of course, with an active engagement of all stakeholders. So here, when we are talking about open science, we are talking about open access, open data, open research, etc. And now one of the tendencies of UNESCO is about open science. As we can see from this figure, we have too many subdimensions involved in open science. Like we said, it's about open data, open infrastructure, open access, open source, open hardware, open evaluation, etc. So as you can see, the importance of open science. Now, someone may ask how open science could be very important in future education. So, and this is like a very basic question. And we can have one simple example, which is about Moodle, which is open source. And we talked about open source, which is one subdimension of open science. As we know, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you know about Moodle, which is an LMS, and it's free and open source. Means that everyone could deploy Moodle for free, and everyone could also personalize Moodle if they need to by accessing its code, because it's open source. So I can easily modify the code and make new version out of it. And here we are talking about the importance of open science. If I need different needs for my institute or for my university or for my courses, I can still change the code for different things. And to see the importance of open sources software or LMS, you can see that since the COVID-19 started, we have 50,000 Moodle sites, which means that Moodle was one of the solutions to maintain education from home. Like we said, first, because it's free. In emergency, in crisis, we need free things. And second, it's open source, which means we can personalize it the way we want. And that's why Moodle, for instance, is one of the official members supported by UNESCO during its initiatives related to Global Education Coalition. So this is one example of open source. Let me give you another example, which is open access. So we have talked about open access as one of the sub-dimensions in open science. So how open access could be useful in future education? So as we all know, open access is very important because, like we said, accessibility is one major problem in educational systems now. And this was emphasized, like we said, by the COVID-19. So I can give you like a simple example, which is about providing open access to electronic textbooks for primary and secondary schools provided by a lot of publishers in China and also by the Chinese government. And this open access has been applied by different governments, such as in UK or United States, in order to provide free and open resources for students. And this could help to fulfill accessibility and equity of education. So here we are not talking education that we need to pay for. Education is free and everyone should access to it. Now I will talk about the third example, which is open data, which is also a sub-dimension of open science. And let's get out of the COVID-19 context. So currently, the Smart Learning Institute of Beijing Normal University is working with Alexo, which covers 22 Arab countries, to develop an open interactive database. So this database will provide in-depth details about the whole Arab region, like the enrollment rate in primary school, secondary school, etc. Imagine if we have all these data open and everyone can access to it. All policymakers could make use of this data and we could learn out of it and we could make different policies. Also in MOOCs, massive open learning, massive open courses, online courses, we have thousands of students. Imagine if all these data are open and then we could make use of them to help personalize and provide in-time support during their learning experiences. So open data is very important when we are talking about open science. And here, speaking of openness and open science, we can see how important and how much needed our future educational systems should be. Now we move to the second dimension, which is open innovations. So what do we mean by open innovation? Open innovations is about providing outside experience, knowledge, and everything, and combining it with the internal innovation or internal skills and knowledge to provide more appropriate and more diversified output to the market. So someone may ask, okay, this is about innovation, but how this could be very important for universities or future educational systems? And this is a very basic question. Actually, open innovation is one core dimension of modern universities and schools and any educational systems. Why? Because now universities, its job or its role is not only to disseminate knowledge, but also to help in development, research and development. So it helps to promote research and development. And here we are talking about innovation, means we need to be open to collaborate with industry and companies to promote research and development. In this context, what will happen? First, if the university cooperate with industries, we will provide a chance for our students to be open innovators. What do we mean by this? We will give them the field, the practical field, which is the company or the society where they can go and practice their skills. As we all know, most of the universities, we provide knowledge, but we don't have enough time to provide them practical skills. Even if we provide, it's like a couple of hours of a course. But if we work with universities, if we work with companies, we will give them the field, the pitch where they can go and work with them. So this is one. We are creating a new educators and a new students called open innovators, where they can go be more innovative, work with different like employee to enhance their knowledge and skills. This is one. Two, also the university will be financially independent. What do we mean? At least for most governmental universities, we get funds from the government. But now, if we can make our products in collaboration with societies and in collaboration with companies, those products could be sold online or offline to different markets. And from this, we can earn money to enhance our courses, infrastructure, etc. So now we are talking about funds, which is not only but also from other places. So here we can talk, for instance, about one example, which is followed in the Smart Learning Institute. So the Smart Learning Institute of Beijing Normal Universities is working with a lot of companies such as China Mobile or the NetDragon company. And we have produced one AI tutor. So this AI is a virtual tutor, and it's deployed in an online platform. When the students need help or they need anything, the tutor could be there to support them, to provide some hints if they have any problems answering different questions or answering different assignments. Also, the tutor could try to get engaged with them, to not make them feel bored or lonely, especially if we are talking about the COVID-19, where online courses is the main learning experience. So there is no social interaction like face-to-face. And also to make this virtual tutor more interactive and more attractive, at least for the kids. You can see in the left picture, we have the possibility to change like the clothes, like how it looks, etc. And here we are talking about personalizing the virtual tutor to make it more appealing for the students. So here we are talking about open innovations. Also, if we can see like the concept of UK, we can see that a lot of policies have been issued by UK universities, like emphasizing about the importance of open innovations between companies and UK universities. Now we move to the last dimension, which is open education. So open education is a philosophy about like producing free and open knowledge, data, and everything, experiences. In open data, you can see we have a lot of sub-dimensions, such as content, such as pedagogy, such as collaboration, research, etc., leadership, etc. From this framework, I will take two things or two sub-dimensions because we don't have enough time, so I will take mainly two dimensions. The first one is about open content. And if we are talking about open content, we can talk about open educational resources. So open educational resources are teaching, learning, and research materials which are published in the public domain for free and under an open license, which means that these resources could be used by others without any restriction, of course, with respect to the open license. So someone may ask how open educational resources could be very useful in future education. As we said, like if you have a commercial resource, you cannot modify it. If you want to modify it, you need to pay a lot of money to get the license from the publisher. And for too many persons, they don't have money. Two, it will take you so much process and time to legally have like the license of this commercial content. But imagine if we have all our resources are open. Means if this resource, for instance, one, let's say Turkish teacher or educator published the course, which is very interesting, and it's OER, means I could reuse it and make it in English and start using it. If others like this resource, also they can make it, let's say, I don't know, in Arabic, in Spanish, whatever, and they can use it for free. So here we are talking about the content could be easily reused in different contexts. Also, if we are talking about accessibility and specifically about persons or students with disabilities, if we have a video as OER, we could easily modify it because it's open to make it in line with the needs of deaf persons or students, in line with the needs of blind students, etc. For instance, we could add like some sign language to it, or we could add some like voice to it, or we could make a lot of changes to fit each disability's needs or each student's need. But like I said, if the video or if the resource is not open, we cannot do this. Either we need to pay a lot of money to get the license, or we need to go through a lot of long and heavy process about legal papers and procedures to get the license to use that resource. Second, we talk about open pedagogy, which is Professor Fahriya already talked about it. So open pedagogy is the practice of engaging with students as a creator of information rather than simply consumers of it. And here we are talking about innovative learning and teaching methods, or engaging learning and teaching methods. In traditional learning, online learning or offline learning, it's mostly a teacher-centered way, means the teacher is speaking and the student is listening. And we have seen a lot of problems, especially with Zoom, like the Zoom fatigue, means the teacher keep talking for 2 and 3 hours in Zoom and the students are listening. And this is not teaching. Teaching is not about this. Teaching is more about interaction. Teaching is more about making students thinkers. This is the future of education. It's about interaction. It's about making students think. So one of the solutions is open pedagogy, where the student will be engaged with the teacher in creating resources that he or she will learn. So here we are talking about active learners. We are talking about active students. We are talking about different learning approach, such as the connectivism approach. We are talking about collaborative learning. We are talking about a new innovative methods based on open pedagogy. Let me give you a simple example. So these examples were collected from our partners during the COVID-19. So as you can see, this example about open pedagogy is from Romania, where the teacher is using both Zoom and WhatsApp as a social network in order to make the learning process more engaging. Means the teacher is talking about one topic with the students on Zoom, then she posts one topic on WhatsApp and asks the students to start interaction and enriching that content by more ideas, more discussions, more examples, etc. And here we can see like the students will start talking to each other, giving comments to each other, and the teacher here, his role or her role will be more as a facilitator. In future education, we are not talking about teachers as teachers. We will talk about teachers as facilitators. This is the difference between the traditional learning process or online learning process and future education. It's not about teaching anymore. It's about facilitating the process and make students lead the learning process. Another examples which come from our institute about the Smart Learning Institute of Beijing Normal Universities, we have taught a course called Family Education. We have used also open pedagogy. So as you can see here, the teacher has taught different children problems to parents, and then she asked the parents to enrich the content by giving more examples. So for each problem, she gave like 1 or 2 examples. Then she asked them, okay, now I will help you, but you need to find more examples and you need to add it to my content. So in this way, the learning content will be more rich. And in this way, the students will go online, start searching for problems, start discussing with his peers or her peers, is this problem good? Is this problem not good? And here we have like one way of discussion, and the teacher will be more as a facilitator. What do we mean? Means that the teacher will say, the keywords, for instance, are not good, or the keywords are very good, or maybe you need not to search in this website, but maybe you need to search, for instance, in this database. So here, the role of the teacher will be more as a facilitator. And then what happens? At the end of the process or the learning process, the teacher collected all the data and all the information and examples given by the students, and she created an open textbook. Means the students enrich the learning content or the teaching content, and they created a new version and they put it online as an open textbook. And this textbook will be used by other teachers. And then the other teachers and their students will also enrich this content. So as we can see here with open pedagogy and OER, we are enhancing the content and creating new ways of learning, which are different than the traditional and somehow boring ways. So we have talked about openness. To summarize, we have talked about openness and 3 dimensions, open science, open innovation, and open education as one of the main dimensions of openness for future education. Now the question is where to start. Okay, we want to adopt openness for future education, but where to start? First, at least from my perspective, the main layer should be supportive policies. What do we mean by this? If we don't have policies which encourage teachers, which encourage students, which encourage administrators to adopt openness, no one will do it. For instance, let me give you a simple example. Now, if you want to get promoted in some Chinese universities, you can publish open access. So instead of mainly publishing, let's say, SSCI papers, you can publish like open access papers to get promoted. So this is one of the ways to encourage teachers to adopt openness. Also, we can see that some of like the governments have initiated a lot of national trainings to help teachers and students gain knowledge and competencies about open access, OER, open pedagogy, etc. So this is one. 2, we need to create open educators. What do we mean by open educators? Open educators is not only about competencies, but also about attitudes. What do we mean? For instance, if I'm not open to share my knowledge and to share my information and my resources online, I cannot adopt OER, for instance, even though I have the needed competencies. So here we need to focus about how to promote and how to create open educators who can think openly and who are ready to share their knowledge with others, because openness is a culture. So we need to adopt this culture first. It's not only about competencies. I could have the competencies, but I will not publish my content as OER. So it's not about mainly competencies, but it's also about attitude. It's also about personalities. So here we need to talk about this. Third, we need to encourage cooperation between academia and industry, like we said, to facilitate research and development. And finally, we need to develop innovative sustainability models to maintain education. What do we mean? As we said, one of the key things about openness is free of charge. But if we keep things free of charge, how we can earn money to maintain like our education, to maintain like our infrastructure, etc. So when we think about openness and things are free of charge, we need also to think about how we can gain money. For instance, we could use advertisement or different things. And this is a hot topic, how we can combine openness, but at the same time, maintain sustainability. So one of the key things is sustainable models, because as we know, without money, we cannot do anything. So this is in general, at least my perspective of future education, which is mainly about openness. And in this context, we have published like different books. One of them is about like facilitate flexible learning. Second is about guidance on open educational resources and practices, and also OER for disability. And in this context, you have worked, for instance, with Professor Fahriya, with Professor Ramesh, with a lot of like researchers and experts from different fields and from different countries to publish to many things. And thank you so much.
Dr. Ahmed, thanks for your valuable insights for this panel. Actually, Professor Ahmed gave a core dimension and core heart of the future of education, and Professor Sharma will shortly summarize what we have said for this future of the education. Professor Sharma from Ambedkar University, Delhi, from India. Now he is going to shortly summarize for the future of education what I and Dr. Ahmed said for this future direction. That's your turn.
Okay, thank you very much. Gunaidin. I hope I can say Gunaidin now. It is afternoon. I thank Professor Ahmed because I pick up one point of him when he very rightly, very excellently said that the real teaching is when the students, they lead their learning. Means when they take charge, when they take responsibility of their learning. And I thank Professor Farie that I'm speaking after him because he has made the sequence for my, and I'm focusing here more on learning to self-learn, because when the students, we make them learning to self-learn, it becomes more like taking charge of their learning. So everybody knows about certain important personalities like former President of the United States, then Bill Gates, Jack Ma from China, and Elon Musk. You know, what these personalities they have in common is that they follow this 5-hour rule, which means that, you read something, then reflect on it, and then do the experimentation on that. Currently, we are living in a VUCA world. VUCA means which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And this has led us to undergo through two kinds of revolutions. One is the fourth industrial revolution, which is artificial intelligence-based technologies dominating. And the another is fourth education revolution, which is the, in a way, name of the book by Sir Anthony Sheldon, in which he says that nothing matters more than education if we are to see AI liberate and not infantilize the humanities. Professor Ahmed will identify this is a future of the things going on as identified by IEEE organization, in which radical life extension and those kind of things, they are being worked upon. So these things, they are currently changing the scenario and impacting on the education. So all these things, they have brought out a certain change in the education system. And this is making that the learner should be a better learner and a faster learner. Better learner means to acquire new knowledge efficiently, and a faster learner because the skills, they are changing very fast. And then the students, they need to be a smarter learner, because we now have the power of artificial intelligence and quantum technologies with us. Einstein once was taking an examination, and he gave the question paper. The assistant identified that this was the question paper which was given the last year. So when he told Einstein about it, Einstein said, yes, the questions are the same, but the answers have changed. So this way, it is a very important thing is there. And you may be knowing that the 1905 has been identified as the miracle year for Einstein, because in that year, he published 4 excellent scientific papers based on photoelectric Brownian movement, special theory of relativity, etc. While at the same time, these other great scientists of our times, they were making people aware about the foundations of quantum mechanics. You may be knowing Niels Bohr, Paul Dirac, Wolfgang, Max Planck, and Schrödinger or Heisenberg, etc. In India, Professor C.N.R. Rao, he has been considered as the most prolific Indian chemist. Once he indicated that in the universities, it is the outdated curriculum. We need to change that for the future of education. So when the world has been shaken up by a known visible microorganism, the virus, we think that, are we dealing with the same questions or they change? Means who is teaching, where do we teach, how do the learners access the learning, how do we support learners, how do we assess learners, what learning resources do we apply, and how do we manage their credentials? So what has changed? The mobile learning infrastructure has changed from being banned into the educational institutions. Now the mobile devices have become the lifeline of the education system. The fourth industrial revolution, the fourth education revolution, etc., they have brought to the front the applications of AI. So what should be the new educational or the future of educational ecosystems is that we need to have AI-empowered self-learning facilitators. Professor Ahmed already said that our role should be to facilitate learning. We need to have lifelong learning, self-learning communities, AI-supported help desks, mobile learning, wearable self-learning devices, blockchain, etc. So with these things, we say that the future of education is there. It has been already, equal 42, the systems are there, where in the absence of teacher, the students are learning. And Professor Sugata Mitra hole in the wall experiment is the world famous, which shows the theory of minimalized intervention by the teacher. No teacher, the students even they learned better. That is self-organized learning, SOLE. So I end my presentation by saying that William Gibson said that the future is already here. It is just not evenly distributed. We need to take care of this. Thank you so much.
Yes, Professor Sharma, thanks for your contribution. And also Professor Ahmed also mentioned about the openness, and the future direction of the education relies on the openness and considering how to be a learner, a better learner. And if there is any question, you are welcome to raise your question or any comments you would like to add this panel. You are welcome to add the contribution. Okay, I think we use our time in a more efficient way, in a great team. I would like to thank conference organizers and the participants who give a very efforts to scientific and development of the school autonomy in terms of the management. And as we are realizing that all disciplines are come together, and from the reflection of different countries, we are now aware that every scholars are telling same thing to put in action. We need to now to consider how to act to our education system in a value-adding setting, in an openness, in an equity, in a human interaction. Yes, Dr. Orhan, we have 2 minutes. If you would like to ask, please. We have 2 minutes. And our presenter can write their emails. If you wish any question, you can ask later if you wish, Dr. Orhan, or if you wish, we have 2 minutes on my time. Maybe we can reflect later by mail. Okay. For FIVCO, is there any connection between open society and open system? Dr. Sharma, please briefly answer this question.
Yeah, there is a very big connection between open society and open system. In fact, when we say open system, it becomes an umbrella term for many other items. Like we say open source software, open data, open society, open governance, etc. So in that way, when we establish a principle of open system, it means that whatever are the components of that, they are in tune and in integration with them. So a very deep relationship.
Okay. Thank you.
Sanırım sona erdi hocam. Çok
And our panel has come to an end now. Thank you so much for joining today. Thank you so much for your contributions. We are very honored to be hosting you here today. And we will wrap up our panel now. We will have a 1-hour lunch break. We will start at 2 o'clock and we will have oral presentations at that time. You can use the links on the program to access them. Thank you so much.
Yes, we come to the end. Thank you. Bye.